Well, so I'm Christopher Hayes. I am a second-time deputy from the Diocese of California to the General Convention. It's my fourth General Convention that I've been present at. It's still, I still feel somewhat new, but last time I was vice chair of a legislative committee, and this time I was the chair of a similar legislative committee, and that was the committee on Title IV disciplinary canons. Which is the largest part of our, and perhaps the most unpleasant part of our church-wide canons. But it's important stuff. So as chair of that committee, I was busy months ago getting ready for this convention because we moved as much of our work as possible to Zoom. So that we could complete it online before we got here to Baltimore and shorten our time together for COVID safety. It's not great for seeing old friends and things that you can only do in person, but it was an excellent solution to the times that we're in now.
And how are you feeling overall about how this convention went?
I think this was a fantastic convention. I think there's a little bit of a blink and you miss it quality to it because our presiding officers encouraged us to put as much of our work on the consent calendar as we could, and we did that. And so what that means is we would get 10 or 20 or even dozens of resolutions would be presented to us all at once. And we would vote on the whole package of them up or down after allowing opportunity for people to try to remove things from that calendar that were controversial and might need some debate. But being on the consent calendar, a lot of places, in normal times, that's the small stuff that you don't need to talk about. Here, we passed a lot of big stuff on our consent calendar. So it's important that people look at that stuff and realize some of the big work we did in record time.
I know that you have been were in the floor convention a couple times during this convention. And one of the times was especially for the LGBTQI and women's ministry position. Why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, well, so the last time that we had a director of women's ministries was 2009 when the position was abolished, I guess because the need wasn't felt for it. The last time we had a director of LGBTQI ministries at the church-wide level was never. So it was really historic for us to get that adopted at this convention and to have it as a funded position on the staff of the presiding bishop. And the reason is that there are volunteers throughout the church, some in our own diocese, like Cameron Partridge and Sarah Lawton, who do tremendous work, both of them on issues affecting transgender and non-binary people. And that work always has to happen. We all have to do it as faithful Episcopalians, but it also needs to have the public knows to go to, or the press knows to go to, somebody who can write resources and run websites and coordinate the actions of all those people throughout the church. And I did speak about it on the floor, and part of what I talked about was the times we're in. You might have thought 6 or 7 years ago that we were on track to kind of where we wanted to be in terms of the full inclusion, not only of LGBTQ people, but the full inclusion of women in leadership roles in the church and in public life. And we're starting to see that go backwards in public life. I don't think anybody can read the news from our Supreme Court without thinking that we are going backward in a serious way for all women. And we're there hasn't been any formal move in the Supreme Court for LGBTQI people, but there is nonstop attack on transgender people, transgender children especially, throughout the country. And the church needs to respond to that, to enlist the state, the power, the coercive power of the state behind anti-trans, anti-woman legislation and judicial rulings. And it's a real threat to freedoms that some of us thought we had secured. And we as the church need to speak out against those who, in the name of our faith, would oppress people.
Right, because there's so much talk about quote unquote Christians leading this this repressive movement, but
yeah, well they identify as Christians, and they tend to claim that their view is the only view, that their view is the only one that matters. And one of the things I talked about was what Margaret Atwood has recently talked about. A lot of people know her as the author of the dystopian novel The Handmaid's Tale, and she wrote that novel in the 1980s, imagining, well, if the United States ever had a dictatorship, what would it look like? And she thought, well, maybe it would look like Puritan America, and this fictional theocracy where the Bible was cherry-picked and all the cherries were interpreted literally. And she said she struggled with it because she thought, this is too far-fetched. This could never happen. This won't happen. We're not going to go backwards in this major way. And now, she's expressing a real fear that we are moving in that direction, because of people who take a faith that we share with them and twist it into a tool to oppress people. And we, as Episcopalians, very much stand against that. What the gospel, a big part of what the gospel means for us, is the freedom to be fully human, to live a fully human life, and as the presiding bishop says, if it's not about love, it's not about Jesus. So that's our message, and we need to work double hard at getting that message out so that people know that there are Christians who stand for love as the central message of the gospel.
I know that we have come to the annual convention for this year, and we just said goodbye to our president for the House of Deputies, and we welcome a new president as well. What are you looking forward to in the next couple of years as we move forward as a church, and not only for our church, but for the government and the world that we influence so much as members of this body?
Thank you, Adia. Well, I mean, number one, I'm very excited about Julia Ayala Harris becoming the president of the House of Deputies. She is now our president. That happened when the gavel came down. I first met Julia probably 6 or 7 years ago, when President Jennings appointed me to a task force called the Task Force on Women, Truth, and Reconciliation. And I didn't know the half of what President Ayala Harris had been doing all that time. She's a powerful speaker. She preached at our worship this morning, and I hope that is available online for people to see. It's very much a sermon worth hearing, to hear about the direction that she wants to help lead us into. From one of our two houses of our church-wide legislative body, and it's a real one thing that has to be said. She's a young leader. I think she's 41 years old. I mean, some of us Gen Xers are feeling like we've been skipped over a bit, but maybe our Vice President Rachel Tabor Hamilton's carrying the Gen X flag. I'd have to check, but and they are both first timers. President Ayala Harris is probably the youngest president, or close to it. She's certainly the first Latina. She's the first woman of color who's been our president. Vice President Tabor Hamilton is our first Indigenous officer of our house. And she's a priest in the Diocese of Olympia in the Seattle area, and a member of the Shakan First Nation tribe that's based in Canada. And I don't I don't know Vice President Tabor Hamilton, but Bishop Mark knows her well and speaks very highly of her. So I'm looking forward to getting to know her better in the coming years.
Anything you want to say about just the overall spirit of the DioCal Deputation? I know you all worked so hard in the months leading up to this, and then there you were on the floor all the time. It seemed like there were so many photos of you, various members of our deputation. What would you say about this group?
Well, we are a very collaborative group. We have, I think, a very talented deputation, and we've had a very talented deputation that's been capable of taking leadership roles for quite a number of years. And so many of our deputies have been appointed, not only appointed to legislative committees, but appointed to be officers of the legislative committees. And we have a tradition of liking to, we have 4 clergy deputies, 4 clergy alternates, 4 lay deputies, 4 lay alternates. So in normal times, we try to change out and have the alternates spend time on the floor. And we couldn't do that for a couple of reasons. One is that the committee officers need to be on the floor all the time in case business out of their committee comes up, because we're responsible for making sure that it completes the legislative path. So we can't change out with people. And the other is that for COVID safety, we had to ask, or the presiding officers asked that all but one of our alternates in each order stay home. So that was hard, because we were making good people stay home, and they couldn't be here with us. They were, I think, most as much as they could, following online the work that we were doing. And communicating with us about what was going on, especially about what was going on in the House of Bishops, where we were too busy to pay attention to the House of Bishops most of the time. And we collaborate enormously because, for example, the work that I did on the Title IV committee meant that, and managing that meant that I couldn't spend as much time as I otherwise would have on the work of all the other committees and all the other legislation that was coming up and all of the people who were running for office. And so we rely on each other heavily to know intimately what the important business is coming before the House, so that we can make educated decisions and voting in rapid succession on one resolution after another. We acted on, I think, more than 400 resolutions in the space of 4 calendar days. It's an enormous amount that went into making those 400 resolutions happen, and on all sorts of issues of prayer book revision, a full inclusion of transgender and binary people in the church, in healthcare, and very long list of resolutions on racial reconciliation, both within and beyond the church. Just an enormous range of issues.
Since we're during our diocesan convention this year, we're gonna be electing new members for the deputation to General Convention 2024. How will you encourage more lay people like yourself to put their name up forward for the next General Convention?
Well, we need people to put their names forward. I imagine that there will be some of us who wish to put our names in again for election, and some of us may not want to. We need at least 8 lay people to be nominated, and at least 8 clergy members to be nominated. You have to have a love for detail, I would say, and you have to be a bit of a church geek. That's a good thing. You have to really, to me, it's about, it's different than most other ministries, most of what we think is ministry, but it makes all those other ministries possible. It's about how we stay organized. It's about how we stay safe together as a church. What are our rules on how we relate to each other? How do we fund everything? How do we decide what's important? When we can only, you're always limited in what you can what you can pay for. So how do you decide what gets paid for this time around, and what might have to wait a little longer, and what maybe is no longer serving us as well as it used to. So you have to be, so if you have an interest in budget and leadership, helping select people who are going to exercise leadership, it's an eye for detail. It's especially if you are a real nerd about writing things and getting the grammar just right, because you've got to convince 800 people that it's a good thing to vote for in the House of Deputies, and 150 bishops that they agree with it. So so there's a lot of detail work involved. But if you're as geeky about it as I am, it's fun.
What was your favorite moment of this convention, if you could pick one?
Favorite moment. The congratulations that we did for President Gay Clark Jennings. She has, and we had several rounds of it because she deserved a lot of thanks. She's been a strong leader in our house. She has led the General Convention, this one, and the one in 2018, and the one in 2015. She was elected at the 2012 General Convention, so she started working as soon as that convention was over. Able to recognize her for the service that she's given to the church was a real moment of joy. And I think also, you said one. I'm going to give you more than one. Prayer book revision. We have in our deputation the Reverend Professor Ruth Myers, who has been a leader for years in the work on our prayer book, and we have tried for one General Convention after another, every 3 years. Let's get a path to reform, to think about what comes next for the prayer book. You know, keeping in mind that when the 79 prayer book was drafted, we weren't ordaining women yet. And you look through the prayer book and you look at all the words in italics that say he and him, and they're all in italics. It's because we hadn't, as it was being drafted, we hadn't quite settled on the idea that maybe a deacon or a priest or even a bishop might be a woman. And now that's a 50-year or nearly 50-year reality. You know, we've been held up by the idea that you really can't change any little thing unless you're ready to change the whole darn book. And if you change the whole book, then you're turning my world upside down. How could you do that? So what we did was we created a better process that we can actually take liturgies on an individual basis and give them a serious look in what we call trial use, and also to authorize them and say, maybe we're going to put this in the book now, maybe we're going to put it in the book later, whichever we're going to do. We're not going to worry about whether we have to order a new print run when people are mostly getting this off the internet anyway. We're going to worry about, is it the right liturgy for the church to have, and do we need it now, rather than making it wait until we've got a whole book to publish. And that's a real advance. And I think one of the things that's really going to help us with is getting wider recognition of rights for the liturgy for equal marriage in the church for same-sex couples, and for people who are transgender or non-binary, where we've traditionally, our marriage liturgies have been limited to people who are male-female binary, I think we're approaching the day in which people can really look at that as a fully authorized liturgy of the church that they will be able to access anywhere without question.
Apart from all the fun legislative sessions that you've been part of, I know you're in the city of Baltimore as well. Anything fun that you have done or looking forward to do before you get back to the Bay Area?
Well, yes, there's not been a lot of time for fun because I have to take my downtime and start messaging my committee members saying, make sure you vote for this, or try to stop this bad thing from happening, or thanks for keeping on top of our work. And And we ended a little bit earlier today, actually a few hours earlier today than I thought. I've got it, and I booked a water taxi. They've sponsored, they set up some activities for us to do in the evening when they were sure we would be done. So I've got a water taxi tour coming up of Baltimore Harbor. And it's my first time to downtown Baltimore. So I'm looking forward to actually seeing a little bit of it later today. I booked my flight for tomorrow morning because I thought we'd be here into the evening, and so I've got a little time on my hands.
Well, have fun, and thank you so much for talking with us and for all the hard work you've done and the successes you've had. We're really proud to have you as part of our deputation.
Yeah.
Adios, Stephanie. Thank you both. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.